Tonight, bomb strike drills after North Korea's latest provocation with a range capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. Plus defectors, Trump loyalists leaving.
But I think we'll have better choices in the future.
Exodus.
He's urging all other German Jews to follow him and come to Israel.
European Jews face an increase in anti-Semitic attacks. And a call to service.
Christianity is a teaching movement.
Hope for a new generation of Christian leaders. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The escalating nuclear threat from North Korea. Good evening in Washington, D.C. I'm Jenna Browder. A brazen violation. That's what world leaders are calling a new missile launch by North Korea. A suspected intercontinental ballistic missile landed near Japanese waters early this morning. It's the second major weapons test this month, and it shows Pyongyang has the potential to strike anywhere in the continental U.S. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke begins our coverage tonight with more on this latest escalation and North Korea's nuclear ambitions.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has launched a record number of missiles this year, and he's made his intentions clear. These are simulations of nuclear attacks on South Korean and U.S. targets.
For North Korea, they're trying to perfect their nuclear weapons, and their main goal in using those weapons is to keep the United States really at home.
As North Korean missile launches intensify, world leaders worry a nuclear test is coming. It would be the first since 2017.
This conduct by North Korea most recently is a brazen violation of multiple UN security resolutions. It destabilizes security in the region and unnecessarily raises tensions.
Friday's test of an intercontinental ballistic missile was the second this month and showed progress in North Korea's missile development. Japan's defense minister calling it one of the most powerful yet, capable of reaching any city in the U.S. ICBMs are designed to carry a nuclear weapon.
They have a very robust ballistic missile program, but then there is the last element of that, which is, can they put a nuclear weapon on a delivery vehicle?
North Korea has been clear about recent changes to their nuclear policy. According to a new law, Pyongyang claims their weapons are no longer meant to deter, but can be used preemptively for operational missions to repulse hostile forces in response to aggression and attack, and to achieve victory in battle if deterrence fails. They can be justified in using nuclear weapons if they've come under a nuclear or non-nuclear attack, or if such an attack is even on the horizon.
It was very aggressive. North Korea is the one that is making threats. They like to talk about the United States and South Korea and Japan, conducting exercises that are really defensive in nature. When you look at the four countries, there's only really one country that's making nuclear threats, and it's North Korea.
In response to Pyongyang's latest tests, the U.S. and South Korea conducted drills simulating aerial strikes on North Korean mobile missile launchers. U.S. officials also reiterating a commitment to our allies and warning Kim Jong-un that the use of a nuclear weapon would lead to a swift end of his regime.
I reaffirm our ironclad commitment to our Indo-Pacific alliances. Together, the countries represented here will continue to urge North Korea to commit to serious and sustained diplomacy.
Experts like Ruggiero say it's important to stop North Korea before they're recognized as a nuclear state. He believes that can be done through a three-pronged pressure campaign involving the military, economic, and diplomatic pressure. While he believes the Pentagon is doing its part, he says the other two elements are seriously lacking. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. And here with us now is Tom Donato with the Hudson Institute. Tom, good evening. What about those two other elements of economic and diplomatic pressure on North Korea? Are sanctions effective?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me. I disagree. I agree with my friend Anthony. Couple pieces to this. Number one, an aggressive deterrence posture, right? Our missile defenses are modest, and certainly modest in the region. We only have 7 THAAD missile defense systems. Only 3 of them are deployed in Asia. Our sanctioning system needs to be more robust. The MTCR missile technology control regime, it's a voluntary system. I think it's a good time to look at that and how we can reinforce it. It has a lot of systematic problems. For example, last year, this diplomatic tool, if you would, was chaired by Russia with a rotating chair. So there's some problems in the traditional institutional regimes that we've been relying upon. And but what we do know is both North Korea and other adversaries, Iran, certainly Russia and China, continue to move forward with aggressive nuclear developments and weapon systems.
Yeah. North Korea recently codified its right to launch preemptive nuclear strikes. How real, Tom, does this make this threat? And can we harden the homeland here against ICBM threats like the one we saw launched just this morning?
Yeah, look, this is a great question. I mean, it's not just the North Koreans. The Russians have told us both privately when I was in the government as well as publicly that it's their intent to use nuclear weapons in the event of a conflict. Yes, we need to listen to our adversaries. Back in 2017, we began to become concerned about the North Korea ICBM threat, but there's a lot we can do domestically. I think we've largely ignored this threat. I think part of it's cultural because of our the separation from our geographic separation. But certainly the ICBM threat is real. Perhaps more proximal, as I wrote in a recent piece for the Hudson Institute, are low-yield nuclear weapons as well, which would be less catastrophic and deployed in the event of a potential regional conflict with Russia. But the homeland needs to pay attention to this. There's a lot we can do. We have existing policy. There's plenty of funding to take a look at this problem, but we need to be realistic. That the homeland may very well be at risk. We need to listen when our adversaries tell us they're serious.
All right, Tom Donano with the Hudson Institute. It's great to get your insights this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
And here in Washington, the Justice Department has appointed a special counsel to continue looking into criminal charges against former President Donald Trump as they relate to efforts to overturn the 2020 election and that Mar-a-Lago classified documents raid.
Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel.
Jack Smith will serve as special counsel, continuing an ongoing investigation into unlawful interference in the transfer of power after the 2020 election and the probe into classified documents seized by the FBI at Mar-a-Lago this summer. Well, the DOJ announcement comes as Trump's 2024 campaign officially gets underway without some longtime allies. There's also a long way to go, but the big question is, will he have the support to win the party's nomination this time around? CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has more.
Donald Trump's third campaign for president already looks and feels different. The major signs are that a few key mega donors and political supporters no longer ride the Trump train.
But I think we'll have better choices in the future.
Following Trump's campaign announcement, his former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted, "We need more seriousness, less noise, and leaders who are looking forward, not staring in the rearview mirror claiming victimhood." Ivanka Trump, who wasn't on the stage last week, put out a statement saying going forward, she will support her father outside the political arena.
It wasn't a withdrawal of support by any means. It was just a statement out in front of everything that said, I'm going to prioritize what matters most. That is my family.
Republican strategist Luke Ball also tells CBN News the mood in the room at Mar-a-Lago was hopeful.
I witnessed a lot of people in the crowd with faces of hope, and they told me afterwards that they felt as if they were proud to be in the fight again.
And he stands by Trump's decision to announce his candidacy unusually early.
America's comeback starts right now.
The message right now is that we are going to unify. We are going to unify under this umbrella of an America First message, and we're going to press forward into these next elections because it's just not time to sit around and wait for other people to decide whether or not they're going to run. The time for action is now.
Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee also gave a ringing endorsement.
This is the message that if he sticks to it, I believe will make him unbeatable. Unbeatable in the primary and unbeatable in the general election.
Senator Lindsey Graham agrees, tweeting the speech charts a winning path for him in the primaries and general election. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a potential GOP opponent getting positive reviews, argues it's too early to declare intentions for 2024.
We just finished this election. Okay, people just need to chill out a little bit on some of this stuff. I mean, seriously.
Pastor Robert Jeffress, a longtime Trump ally, believes the GOP is headed for a civil war he wants no part of, and told Newsweek that he will hold off on any endorsements until the party has an official nominee. The first GOP primary is not until February 2024, and it could be months before any other candidates decide to join the fray. On the Democrat side, President Biden says he intends to run and will likely make an official decision at the start of next year. Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Okay, thank you, Abby. And joining us now, Julia Manchester, national politics reporter with The Hill. Julia, it's so good to see you. We've seen defections from Trump loyalists now, and the DOJ, of course, appointing a special counsel to assess criminal charges. How could these ongoing investigations, Julia, affect Trump's 2024 bid? Some are thinking he's only running so that he won't be indicted.
Yeah, so good to see you, Jenna, and welcome back. Turning to the Trump stuff, look, I think it really is a weight on his campaign shoulders, and I think it's something that could prove to be a distraction for voters. Yes, of course, he can use this to appeal to his very conservative base, saying that the Washington establishment, the Democratic establishment, pointing to the fact that Merrick Garland is the attorney general under a Democratic president, is out to get him. However, at the same time, he comes with a lot of baggage. And I think we are hearing from more and more Republican leaders and Republican figures that they don't necessarily want to deal with that baggage right now. And if you just look to last week's midterm elections, we saw a number of pro-MAGA, pro-Trump candidates who have been echoing President Trump's message about the establishment out to get him, echoing a lot of his unfounded theories that he won the presidential election 2020, and it hasn't really helped them. We have seen a number of pro-MAGA candidates lose their races and in some cases win them, but by very narrow margins. So I think the Republican Party right now is at a moment of reckoning.
Yeah. On the Hill, Julia, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announcing this week she's stepping down from leadership, opening the door to a new generation of leaders in her party. Is Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York pretty much a shoo-in?
It seems at this point he is pretty much a shoo-in. He is very much the likely front runner for this position. We've seen other Democrats really start to coalesce around him. He is seen as someone who can bridge the gap between the more moderate establishment Democrats and those growing members of the Progressive Caucus. So definitely seen as the expected front runner for this position.
The GOP at the same time celebrating Pelosi's departure. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, probably soon to be Speaker, telling Fox News, "We have fired Nancy Pelosi." Julie, what does all of this mean for Democrats' agenda in the House?
In the House, I think Democrats still face a rocky road ahead. Look, they performed much better than expected in the midterms, and that shouldn't be ignored. But at the same time, they lost the House. So it's going to be difficult for them, I think, as well as it'll be difficult for Republicans, too, to deal with this gridlock. There aren't much seats separating the two parties at this point. So it's going to be difficult for Democrats to really champion a lot of their legislation. I think they're going to have to be playing defense on behalf of the Biden administration. We know that Republicans have said they would like to look into investigating Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden. So it's going to be sort of an uphill climb for Democrats. But I think the fact that they performed much better than expected in the midterms does provide them with a little cushioning. It's allowing them to say to Republicans, look, you don't have a mandate necessarily against us. So I think we're going to see probably more gridlock, unfortunately.
All right. Julie Manchester with The Hill, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And coming up, why European Jews are calling on a mass exodus from Germany and what that means for Israel. Welcome back. As the cold of winter settles in Ukraine, the Russian onslaught against critical infrastructure is here. Moscow aiming to cripple the Ukrainian power grid and make life unlivable for civilians preparing for the cold. 10 million people are without power after a barrage of Russian strikes in recent days. This even as Russians retreat on the battlefield, stacking up losses, including the recently liberated city of Kherson. Meanwhile, in Germany, an onslaught of anti-Semitism. Attacks against Jews up 30% this year alone. Millions of Europeans are accusing the nation of Israel of mistreating the Palestinians and even comparing the Jews to Nazis. Paul Strand reports on the rampant anti-Semitism that's now causing Jews to flee Germany.
German Jew Simon Gorlick is calling for a mass exodus from the former Nazi nation that committed the Holocaust. Here in Jerusalem, prominent Rabbi Abraham Cooper described Gorlick's feelings.
It's not safe for him. He doesn't like hiding his Jewish identity in public. He's making Aliyah, and he's urging all other German Jews to follow him and come to Israel.
Gorlick said of Germany in a public letter, "You can't live in this country as a Jew, and I don't want to live in this country anymore."
As Europeans, we have to be worried and very concerned.
Tomas Sandel fights for religious rights in Europe.
I'm very sad because I know always when Jewish population feels that they need to leave Europe, we have troubles ahead of us.
Acts against Jews are up almost 30% this past year in Germany.
You're seeing Jews being beaten up in the streets of Berlin again.
Cooper says many in today's Europe believe Israel mistreats Palestinians, so these Europeans brand the Jewish nation a place akin to Nazi Germany during the Holocaust.
That 150 million Europeans believe what the Nazis did to the Jews in the 30s and 40s, the Jews are doing to the Palestinians here. That is a monstrous lie.
It's led Gorlick to write, "I don't want to live in a country where half the population sees our Israeli flag as a provocation."
If you say that Israelis are today's Nazis, would you get really upset if they're beating up some of them on the streets of the capital of today's Germany? Not necessarily.
Cooper believes this is just plain wrong.
Germany has a historic responsibility, now and forever, not to cause harm to Jewish people. They did enough during the Nazi era.
After World War II, Germany and many of its people condemned for decades what the Nazis did in the Holocaust. Now Cooper says that condemnation seems to be slipping away in a most troubling way. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Paul. And when we come back, scandals in the church and the need for a new generation of Christian leaders. New research shows a troubling trend concerning the church in America. Confidence in Christian leaders has been declining in recent years, sparked in part by reports of abuse, immorality, and other scandals. Charlene Aaron shares how one pastor sees the need for a new generation of leaders that lives according to the requirements in Scripture.
Jesus has words for us about leadership, as does Paul, as does Peter, as does the epistle to Hebrews. So the New Testament, and going back to the Old Testament as well, God has not left us without a vision for what leadership should look like in the local church.
In his new book, Workers for Your Joy, The Call of Christ on Christian Leaders, pastor and seminary professor David Mathis emphasizes how that call must be viewed through the lens of Scripture, the embracing a priority of servitude.
It comes from the Apostle Paul at the end of his first chapter in his second letter to the Corinthians, where he says, "We don't lord it over your faith, but we work with you for your joy." And if Paul, who was an apostle and one of the official spokesmen for the risen Christ, who wrote Scripture, could say that he didn't lord over his leadership over the Corinthians, but he worked with them for their joy, how much more so pastors in the local church, that we would have a vision that why we are leading is for the sake of the joy of our people in Jesus Christ.
On CBN's Prayer Link, Mathis says his book specifically follows the recent rise and fall of various church leaders and points out what possibly led them astray.
You will find in one rise and fall story after another some clear broach of attribute and virtue that has been laid out by Christ and his apostles 2 millennia ago in the New Testament. So that list in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus 1 is significant. Paul means it. The apostles mean it. And there is wisdom in that list for healthy, normal leaders in the church today.
The qualifications in the 1 Timothy list includes being blameless, sober, and of good behavior. Mathis adds the ability to teach is also key.
When we think of ability, we might think of, does this mean world-class oratory or great gifting? Is he an entertainer? Is he a gifted communicator? I don't think that's what's meant. What's meant is ability in the context, and it's a man who wants to teach. The pastors and elders should be those who want to feed the flock, like Jesus said, to feed his sheep, and to do that through teaching the Bible. It can be very simple.
A simplicity, Mathis says, is needed now more than ever.
Christianity is a teaching movement. Jesus was the consummate teacher in a day, frankly, where people can bristle at teaching. They want pastors to do just about anything other than teach. Do this, do that, care for us, listen to us, counsel us, very important things. But sometimes there is a kind of pressure in the pastoral ministry to not teach. And that is the central qualification and calling of local church pastors in the New Testament.
While Mathis challenges aspiring and seasoned leaders to faithfully embrace the call of Christ, he also encourages those in their congregations to consistently pray for them. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thank you, Charlene. And still ahead, a special delivery marks the beginning of the holiday season in the nation's capital. Finally tonight, the holiday season has officially arrived at the U.S. Capitol. The Capitol Christmas tree pulling into Washington, D.C. bright and early this morning. This year's tree, named Ruby, arrived after a 2-week journey from North Carolina. The 78-foot-tall red spruce was harvested from the Pisgah National Forest and left its home for Washington in early November. The special tree took its traditional tour along the way, making more than a dozen stops so visitors could help celebrate. Now that Ruby is in Washington, D.C., she'll be decked out in lights and ornaments handcrafted by communities in the Tar Heel State. This all in preparation for the official tree lighting ceremony on November 30th. And let the holiday season commence. That's going to do it for Faith Nation this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend.